It's interesting because you think about acclimation just on the walk, but we're starting at sea level in
Right.
Greater Los Angeles.
Yeah, right.
We drive there, and we're already at 8,000 feet at Whitney Portal.
Yeah.
So then on day one, you're climbing up to about 12,000 feet at Upper Boy Scout Lake. We camped overnight. The next day, we walked up to Iceberg Lake and back down and slept. And this was all part of our acclimation. And then we woke up at 3 o'clock the next morning. We summited and came all the way back down, packed up camp, and walked all the way back down to Whitney Portal. And it was absolutely exhausting at the end of the day.
How long a day was that?
We
From
changed
3 in the
that
morning?
the second time, 3 a.m. until, and then we drove home that night.
We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. B1 Bank knows that entrepreneurs like you are always thinking one step ahead. So you need banking solutions that can keep up. It begins with lending. Does your business need working capital or financing for new equipment? How about a real estate or a construction loan? Good news, the B1 lending team is ready to learn your goals and help you find the best lending option available. Now let's talk about uncomplicating your daily cash flow. B1 offers a full array of treasury management services that let you collect funds faster, pay funds more efficiently, and access your information with powerful online tools. Most importantly, B1 understands the value of working with local nonprofits to build a stronger community. They believe in giving back through hands-on involvement with their B1 Community Outreach Program because it's simply the right thing to do. B1 Bank. Be uncomplicated. To learn more, visit b1bank.com. Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Hello, I'm Andrew McClendon, your host of the NXT Entrepreneur Podcast, and I'm very excited to be back in the studio with Propel Productions and welcome our guest, Mr. Robb Antrobus.
Thank you.
CEO and co-founder of Uptown Climbing. Robb, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
So, and thank you for your patience. It took us a while to get you in here on our end. So I haven't told my audience this yet, but about 6 weeks ago, I had a little spill on my road bike cycling in Colorado in Summit County, and was going fast and went down hard and ended up breaking a clavicle and a couple of ribs and a lot of tender internal pain there. But I am back, and you may have seen we ran some of our episodes from last season while I was out. But I was trying to get back here last week, but we still had some aftermath of Hurricane Ida, and we had to push you again. So thanks for your patience.
Three's a charm.
Yeah,
Here we
yeah.
are.
So let's roll. Let's talk about Uptown Climbing.
Yeah.
Let me just say, I went there yesterday to visit with you, and it was my first time in the studio, and it's really cool. So I'm really looking forward to getting fully recovered and going in there and climbing with you.
I expect it of you.
Yeah. So tell us about Uptown Climbing.
Yeah. So indoor rock climbing is growing nationally. I've dabbled in rock climbing and, find myself back in Baton Rouge with this new venture. But the gym itself is a combination of membership and walk-ins and fitness and yoga and groups. And we kind of take everybody. And on your first visit, we take you by the hand, give you a tour of the facility. If you're just walking in, we have some people drive by, say, "Oh, I saw this big building."
Yeah.
And they come in. It's like, we can have you climbing in 15 minutes.
Yeah, I was really impressed with like your systems from when we walked in the door. And, as far as how you register and, do your liability waiver and then Lainey and Allison were with me, and I did not climb, but they did, and they put them through an orientation, and it looked like your staff is just it looks like a very well run operation.
We are super lucky with our staff.
Yeah.
It's kind of mostly college kids and high school kids, coming through on a part-time job, but we've been lucky to get super sharp folks in there.
Yeah, when you look at your website and you look at your staff and some of those that you're describing there, I mean, just a good-looking group of people, look healthy and happy, and
we're all rock climbers.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. So I love the atmosphere there. So, and I loved your explanation of, what different things you have going on in there, just within the rock climbing aspect of it.
Yeah.
And tell us about the different type climbing options that you have there.
Sure. So everything we do inside is some kind of a replica of what's outside. And so when you're climbing outside, you've got essentially two types of climbing. You're climbing on ropes, or you're climbing on boulders without ropes. And so if you broadly break things down, you've got bouldering and you've got rope climbing.
Okay.
So in the gym, we have bouldering and we have rope climbing. The bouldering wall, which is upstairs, as you saw on our mezzanine, it's a little shorter. It's 15 feet high.
Right.
But since you're not climbing with ropes, every time you fall, you're hitting the ground. And so we've got 14 inches of padding underneath that. And
so long wall,
90 feet long by 15 feet high.
Yeah.
And bouldering is typically more powerful, more dynamic movement than what I like to call the ballet, on ropes.
And then there's a couple of different type rope options from
Correct.
what I appreciate it. So walk us through what those are.
Yeah, so rope climbing is broken down into top rope climbing and lead climbing. And so top rope climbing is exactly what it sounds like. You have a rope pre-rigged over the top.
Right.
And so you've got one person on the other end of the rope. You're tied into the opposite end, and as you climb, they're taking out slack. And so if you're tired or if you fall and you let go, you're only falling into a few inches of slack and whatever stretches in the rope.
Right.
Okay. And then you have lead climbing, and that's where you tie into the rope, but you're pulling that end up as you go, and you're clipping into these points of protection as you go.
So there's some station clip carabiners or whatever you call them.
We call them quick draws.
Quick draws.
Yeah.
And you'll clip into those, and you'll climb up to the next one. Now, if you were to fall before you get there, you would only fall as far as
twice as far as the last one. Right. Yeah. So that's where some wonderful adrenaline in there. But you can take, in the gym at least, 10, maybe 15 foot, we call them whippers, and you'll pull your Blair up off the ground, sometimes as they catch you. So great adrenaline rush. And then within that kind of top rope arena, we have what are called auto belays, which don't require any rope skills. So we teach you how to clip into those. And then we have 7 auto belays in the gym that you can go in. And once we've put you through the orientation, you can clip in and you can climb up on multiple routes on those. And we have in the back of the gym, 2 of them side by side. We call it our speed wall, our race wall. And so 2 folks can race up the back side, correct?
Yeah. So we saw Allison and Lainey have a little speed competition. And I'll use that term speed very, very loosely, ladies. And the winner then took you on in a speed race. But I was going to say, and I want to talk about it a little bit later on, but it's about your culture. But there was something that happened when the ladies here were climbing, and you had some of your customers come in. Some of your members, because they were heading into the gym. And they stopped and were cheering them on. I mean, these ladies are near the top and they're getting tired, and they stopped and were cheering them on and clapping and yelling words of encouragement. I'm like, at first I thought it was the staff. And then I turned around and realized it was just your customers. I thought, that's a cool sense of community there.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, there's within the bouldering and the rock climbing, you have different routes, right, and different levels. Explain what that system is, and then how that works.
Sure. So everything you climb in the gym is of a certain difficulty. And so we say you can rainbow your climb, which means you grab whatever you can, you put your hands and feet wherever you want. Excuse me.
Meaning that, I think I know what you're saying because I saw this yesterday, but each route has a color.
Correct.
Of what do you call the rock things that you're
climbing holds.
The climbing holds. So if you were going to do, say, a 5.6, that wall may be covered with all sorts of climbing holds of all sorts of different colors, but the 5.6 route may be all green.
That's right.
And so your job is to just grab onto the green ones.
That's right. So under any given rope, you may have 2 or 3 routes, and you can choose to climb one of those routes of a certain difficulty. And exactly to your point, if you're climbing an easy one, it's going to be one color, but below every route, there is a tag that states the color of the holds, states who set it, the name of the route, and the difficulty of the route. And as you mentioned, the 5.6, which is called the Yosemite decimal system, is how we rate roped climbs.
Okay.
Easiest one in the gym is a 5.6. The scale goes up to now 515D, I think. And the hardest in our gym right now, we just call it a 5.hard. But the highest one we've rated is a 513A.
Okay. And so that scale, Yosemite scale, what do you call it?
Yosemite decimal system, correct.
So that's used internationally?
Yeah, there's a separate European system as well. And you'll see charts that kind of correlate the ratings across the board. So when you're bouldering, it's a different scale. It's called the V scale. And so you've got V0 on up to now V15 or 16.
And you have those scales on all of your climbs, both bouldering and on the rock walls for the
That's
rope
correct.
climbs. So if you're climbing out in nature in Yosemite or wherever, similarly, if you were going to tackle a climb, it would have a rating, and you would know whether you were fit for that, experienced for that. So it would kind of keep you out of trouble, right?
Yeah, there's a rough correlation, but if you go buy a guidebook, you're headed to a crag somewhere, the guidebook's going to have all of the routes named, and it's going to have that same scale rating system to it. The hard part is when you're setting in a gym, you're trying to set and correlate to the outdoors, but the outdoors is always a little bit different. And I think, at least in my experience, typically a 5.11 outside is a whole lot harder than a 5.11 inside.
Well,
maybe it's adrenaline, maybe it's just difficult of correlation, who knows. So
when you think of climbing outside, it's an interesting sport in that there's not a lot of coverage for it, at least to the general public that I'm aware of. Yet, I'm thinking of that Free Solo documentary with Alex Honnold, and where he tell us about it. What wall did he climb?
El Capitan.
So is that like 3,000 feet?
It's about 3,500. Yeah. So
yeah. And so, for those that haven't seen that documentary, it's chilling because he climbs that without a rope.
Yeah. So the outcome.
Right.
And he's being interviewed throughout. He does it.
Right.
But throughout that documentary, you're on edge. I mean, it's frightening to think that. I mean, after 10 minutes in, if he falls, he's dead.
Yeah, and it really is. It's moderately terrifying to watch, and there's a couple of particular moves that are death-defying, literally. And but I guess he would obviously be the best-known climber to the modern.
Perhaps best known, not necessarily the best.
Right. Yeah, I could see that.
Who am I to comment on such things? But
so it's really cool. You've got your climbing systems, your bouldering system upstairs, marking all the routes. But I was just floored to learn when you told me that you change your routes. Is it weekly?
It's weekly, with exception, of course.
Yeah. So how many routes would you say, do you know the number of routes in total in the gym?
I can give you some quick math. So we have about 60, 65 rope stations downstairs, and we are trying to get to 3 routes per rope station. So you're looking at about ultimately 180 plus routes there. And then on the boulder, there may be a route every 5 feet on average or something like that, maybe more, depending on the density. But climbing holds are expensive.
Yeah.
And so when we first started, we had 1 to 2 routes, and we've been adding on as we go. And we're getting ready to, and this is very exciting for a lot of people in the gym, to add a new color, right? So we talked about that the color of the hold was the route. Now we're going to be adding hot pink with our next climbing hold. And when you tell our members that, they're like, yes!
Yeah, how exciting. So when you mentioned earlier about climbing the rainbow, what that meant was not necessarily sticking to the right color for that route, but if you were just going up and just grabbing anything of any color, I guess that's where some people would start, right?
It's where most people start.
Yeah.
You come in, you're nervous. You're just trying to get to the top. You're not trying to stay on route. And so,
so in addition to that, you have a yoga studio there.
Yeah. So if you think about rock climbing, it's all pulling muscles, right? I'm pulling and I'm gripping. And so we have, I just call it ancillary fitness. We've got a fitness room. We've got a yoga studio. You need to take care of the rest of your body. You're going to be prone to injury. Yeah. And so our members get access to free standard yoga classes, and then the entire fitness room to work on all of the pulling muscles and the extensors, the extending muscles as well, to try and minimize risk of injury.
Yeah, very cool, man. It's a great business, when you walk through, why things were designed the way they were and where they were in the building. It made me realize that, of course, he went through 10,000 decisions to make it turn out the way that it is. So congrats on that. So, in learning a little bit about your past, no surprise that I would define you as an adrenaline junkie, maybe in your younger years, or some of the things that you had done that I had found fascinating. You summited Mount Whitney, for example, not once but twice.
Correct.
And so tell us about what that experience was like.
Yeah. So I think I'm an adventurer as opposed to an adrenaline junkie, perhaps. I'm not going to put on a wingsuit, and fly by the edges of mountains or anything like that. But I appreciate a good adventure.
Yeah, I'd have to redefine that, seeing what some people do nowadays. Right?
I know, it's crazy.
For us old guys, maybe. But
and then I'm also very competitive with myself and in general, right? So we were doing adventure races and mountain bike races and things like that, which were just a stinking lot of fun. Mount Whitney, I summited with an old buddy of mine from my KPMG days, and we climbed that with someone he found who was trying to raise money for an organization for the blind in California, where I was at the time. And
now,
so
Whitney is in what state?
Whitney is in California.
California.
Yeah, it's the highest peak in the contiguous United States, just shy of 15,000 feet. And you can get up any number of ways. The John Muir Trail actually goes up the backside, and we took what's called the Mountaineers route. And you have to get a backcountry pass, and you go and you camp and do your summit.
Now, ropes.
We carried one short rope, and so if you kind of look at the route up Mount Whitney, we camped and slept at what's called Upper Boy Scout Lake, and then you go on I'm going to forget times and elevations, but then you go to ice. I forget it, Ice Something Lake.
Yeah.
And that's really the base of the difficult part of the climb. And it's a lot of hands and feet and scramble at first. We talked about the Yosemite decimal system.
Yeah.
So when you get past 5.5, it's like, well, you have to use your hands. There's kind of a 5-4 range where it's more scramble, where it's kind of hands and feet. You can still balance on your feet. And so Mount Whitney is some combination of all of those things with some very short, tricky areas, that make you a little bit nervous. But you're not wearing climbing shoes. You're wearing, a little more rugged outdoor shoe.
Yeah. I read a book called Impossible First. Have you seen that?
I have not.
The guy's name who wrote it is, I think his name is Colin O'Brady. And he spent a lot of his time on Mount Whitney. And it seemed like weather was a real factor in that mountain.
So we tried to take weather out of the equation. I think both of ours were in July, where most of the snow is melted off.
Yeah.
Because when you add snow and ice to the equation, it changes everything. Yeah. And it's a whole different skill to learn. And so we were in snow only for a little bit up this big talus slope that is part of the summit route.
Yeah. And what he ended up circumnavigating, maybe it's not the right word, but crossing the South Pole from edge to edge, going through the actual South Pole. And
I don't plan on doing that.
No, it was grueling. But he cut his teeth on that mountain and summited it many, many times, and maybe even worked there in the park. But Fred and I had done summited Mount Humphrey, the tallest point in Arizona,
okay.
Flagstaff. And that was a great hike. It was 11.6. But I think the thing for flatlanders like you and I is that altitude. And we only acclimated for like a day. And it probably would have been advisable if we acclimated another day. But how long did y'all have to acclimate for Whitney?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you think about acclimation just on the walk, but we're starting at sea level in
Right.
Greater Los Angeles.
Yeah, right.
We drive there, and we're already at 8,000 feet at Whitney Portal.
Yeah.
So then on day one, you're climbing up to about 12,000 feet at Upper Boy Scout Lake. We camped overnight. The next day, we walked up to Iceberg Lake and back down and slept, and this was all part of our acclimation. And then we woke up at 3 o'clock the next morning. We summited and came all the way back down, packed up camp, and walked all the way back down to Whitney Portal. And it was absolutely exhausting at the end of the day.
How long a day was that?
We changed that the second time, 3 a.m. until, and then we drove home that night. So, I think we got home in that 10 o'clock to midnight range, and everybody was just like, who's driving?
Yeah.
It's crazy. But the second time we changed tacks, and we actually summited the following day, came down and just stayed at 12,000 feet and relaxed and celebrated the summit, and then walked off and drove home.
Very cool. All right, Rob, let's take a quick break, get in a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. One of our sponsors, MBD Maintenance, is excited to announce that after 25 years, they're rebranding their company name to Pivotal. It's the same ownership, same staff, same location. Just a new name that better represents the services that they provide their clients across the Southeast United States. Pivotal does commercial building construction and renovation. They do tenant improvement work in retail and office facilities. They do installation of dock doors in distribution centers, storm and fire damage repair, and catastrophe recovery for national disasters. The team at Pivotal is simply the best. Their experience, they crush schedules, and they have an impeccable safety record. If Pivotal can help you with your next project, you can find them online at pivotalperforms.com. And we are back with Robb Antrobus with Uptown Climbing. So, Rob, I wanted to dial it back a bit. You're a Baton Rouge guy. You're from here originally, right?
Born and raised, correct.
Yeah. And CHS.
Catholic High.
Yeah, go Bears, like myself. And college.
Vanderbilt University. I'm a Commodore.
And you
recently voted second or third most attractive mascot in the nation.
Well, so there's something.
It's the jawline.
So geology major?
Correct. Full circle on the rocks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, geology's
It
cool
really
thing.
is.
My older brother's a geologist, and when you're out there in nature, it's you can see some pretty cool things. And then you did that for a while. You actually.
Yeah. So Vanderbilt back home, I was a practicing geologist here with a little company called QRI. At the time, did that for 4 years and change, and they're still around. I think still same owner. And then decided to get my master's in business and go to LSU grad school.
So you got an MBA from LSU, and then went into the corporate environment.
Big 4, Big 5, Big 6. I forget where
Yeah.
we were at the time. But my so my master's degree had concentrations in internal audit and information systems, and so I was an internal auditor as opposed to what most people think of as auditing, which is external audit and the financials and the books. I actually looked at business processes and risk, and so it was pretty cool. I would go into all sorts of companies. I've seen several manufacturing floors, from making of Goodyear blimps to Kubota lawnmowers to cigarettes to Golden Flake cheese puffs. It was a great, cool, part of my life.
Yeah. So Deloitte to start. You did that for a while.
Deloitte to start. I was there for about 2.5 years, and the partner who had hired me into Deloitte went over to KPMG and hired me over to KPMG. And then I was
did
there
that for a while,
just about a decade.
Yeah.
With probably 3 different careers just within KPMG.
Oh yeah. And then at some point, things changed.
Yeah. So again, former partner and good friend of mine from KPMG, who was from California, hired me out to California to go work for a company called ICANN. ICANN is the, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to forget it, in the middle of this, but the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and they manage the
ICANN.
Yeah, they manage the domain name system for the internet, effectively, in a nutshell,
right,
worldwide. And so we were part of a very interesting project to expand the real estate on the internet from what most people know of as the original, well, not original, but 22 about top-level domains, .com, .edu, .net, .gov. And
right.
So our program expanded that into others after the dot, as we call them, .amazon, .bank, and so on and so forth. So that was a highly stressful job.
Yeah, so you're the guys that confuse the world with all that
I
stuff.
try to confuse everybody I come across.
So at some point, you exit there.
Yep.
And that's kind of where you're now exiting the corporate world, right?
That's right.
So talk us through what happened, when you're leaving that environment, and what happened next.
A break, right? So I quit there, and I was doing consulting for them.
You're stressed out.
I'm stressed out. Took some time off, and the gentleman, Toby, my friend who I had summited Mount Whitney with, and I are having a beer at lunch one day. Toby, who was doing iPhone app development, he had come up with an idea that he had been pursuing for a year, and so we're like, what's next for us? What's next over this beer? And just in casual conversation, taking Mount Whitney into account, I was like, well, we should open a rock climbing gym. The industry is growing, and where we were in California, we're just like, oh, there's gaps all over Southern California. Let's do one in Redondo Beach, near where I lived at the time. And so that was really, for me at least, the beginning of even the thought of a climbing gym.
I was thinking about this. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that go into business for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's because they're doing what they know how to do, or they've identified a business model. Maybe it's a franchise, and a lot of the questions are answered for them, and they can. But they may be making donuts or selling pizza or whatever. But they're really in business. They're not necessarily in love with donuts.
Yeah.
But I think our guest tomorrow did the donut business, and maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
Does anybody not like donuts, though?
Well, yeah, good point. Of course you'd go in the donut business, silly me. But I found it interesting that it with that story about you and your buddy sitting down over a beer, it sounds like what y'all had identified, really more than anything, is what you love to do.
Yeah.
And to take that and then make it into a business, I think that's pretty exceptional. I think I don't think it happens as often as people might think. You know?
And I can only speak, to where I came, to the idea at the end of the day. But we knew the business was out there. There have been, gyms around for 20 years. In Lafayette, there was a gym for 20 years roughly before we opened Uptown. So, yeah.
All right. So you're drinking the beer, and you say, "That's it. That's what we're going to do."
Yeah. So we got to work pretty quick. We, reached out to SCORE, is it? And we put together a very healthy business plan. We started shopping for real estate in Redondo Beach and Torrance and surrounding areas, all the places we thought there were gaps in the Southern California market, and started searching for bank loans. And so we were months into this whole thing, and we'd signed up to go to the Climbing Wall Association meeting in Boulder, Colorado, which is our national organization, sport organization. And about 3 weeks prior to that, Toby and I have a little sit down, and he had to back out for personal reasons. Perfectly legitimate, no ill wills. Toby and I are still great friends, and so here I am, and I'm like, what do? I gotta find another partner. Right.
Yeah. I imagine it's a little easier to conceive going through that new business startup with a partner, someone to talk to and share, and now that's gone. Now you're by yourself.
That's right. And this is big investment, right? Yeah. It's a little scary.
Well, I can imagine the real estate or even the lease rates in Redondo Beach would be a little intimidating.
Well, if I tell you how much those rock climbing holes cost, that alone is intimidating.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to Boulder all by my lonesome.
To this convention,
and I'm sitting down in one of the first sessions there on writing your business plan. I'm going to check my dots, like what did I miss in the business plan? And as you do at these things, you start chatting with the other attendees, and I'm chatting with a guy, I think over a beer, because most rock climbers enjoy beer. And I was at this particular session, and so we're chatting, where are you from? The usual conversation. And he says, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I'm like, what? I'm from Baton Rouge, small world story, truly. And where'd you go to school? The next question, especially in Baton Rouge, which is a pretty small town. And he says, I went to Catholic High. And I'm like, I went to Catholic High. And so here I am in Boulder, Colorado at a rock climbing convention, and I meet another guy from Catholic High, and that guy is Lee Guilbeau, who is the other owner-operator at Uptown. And so we had this conversation. We chatted a few more times during the course of that, and I said, well, let's keep in touch. I said, if I can't find a climbing partner to work with and do this together in California, I will move back home to Baton Rouge if you're interested in working together and do this. And so that was how I came to be. So that was in May of 2014. And and I moved back to Baton Rouge in December of 2014.
Unbelievable. So y'all said, let's do it. Let's make this happen. And
That's right.
And
Lee comes from a fitness background, and he is much deeper and stronger as a rock climber than I am. And so I come with, kind of the business side of things. Lee comes with the fitness and, detailed level climbing experience. And he's our head route setter. We were talking about setting the routes at the gym.
Yeah, that's cool. So how is that going into business with someone that you literally just met? I mean, you have some comfort that, okay, we grew up in the same place and maybe, share something with going to the same high school. But other than that, I mean, you just met him. I mean, I think that's pretty interesting. And I really wanted to, I'm glad you brought that up because I do want other entrepreneurs to know, like, that's a real possibility. Here you are 6 or 7 years later, and you guys are going strong. And I mean, probably would not have happened had y'all not met at that convention.
I had never pondered coming back home to do this prior to that. I probably would have walked away from the idea, but
that's a big commitment on your part to leave where you were. And, I mean, it's a pretty nice place you were.
Yeah. I mean, so I left Baton Rouge. I lived in Atlanta, Miami, North Jersey outside of Manhattan, Los Angeles. And so I've been in some pretty metropolitan cities, and now to come back to Baton Rouge, it was, I had to have a conversation with myself about it, I mean, Lee and I chatted several times, interviewing each other effectively. And so here we are. I imagine it's a lot like a marriage.
Yeah. And so you guys obviously decided to go for it. And what's the first step, real estate, or what y'all do?
Real estate and financing, both of which were very difficult. So, we had our investor group lined up, a healthy portion, I think over 50% of the equity lined up. And I talked to bank after bank after bank after bank, and nobody wanted to do it. We were pretty well covered. So it was very difficult to find a bank.
Even with 50% equity, you couldn't get 50% debt financing from a bank?
Yep.
Because just too speculative?
Yeah, I think had we'd been able to check the franchise rock, nobody knows what rock climbing is around here.
Yeah.
If we had come in with, a franchise backing or something like that, and they could actually see history of revenue, but we had nothing, right? We just had our pro formas. And so, we eventually got the financing side of things lined up, and in the meantime had been looking for real estate and just got very lucky on real estate. If you look around Baton Rouge, there's not a lot of empty warehouses with 35-foot ceilings, and we wanted to make our walls of a certain height.
Or even if they are 35 feet, usually the building's going to be so big that it'd be
1 million square feet of warehouse kind of thing.
Or expensive to carve it out.
Correct.
So your location, I think, is really good, and
we could not have been luckier for two big reasons: Costco and Home Depot. They're just right there. I've made so many trips to Costco and Home Depot; it's crazy.
So you're right there on Coursey.
On Coursey Boulevard, outside of the curve. If you know exactly where to look, you can see the corner of the building from Airline Highway, which is pretty special.
Yeah. And very cool design, as far as, like you mentioned, the height that you needed in the building. So did you do a build-to-suit on the building and the land? Or did you buy the land and did build-to-suit on the building?
Yeah, so we found someone who was willing to invest in us, who bought the land and built the building, and we kind of paid a little extra from us to customize the inside of the building. Right. So it's not just a pure warehouse space, but it has a party room and has offices and has bathrooms with showers. our locker rooms effectively. So we carved out some of that space and added to the build to suit.
Yeah. Right. So it's really cool. So. So that helped then with your debt portion?
Yeah.
Is that how you overcame that, or how did you overcome that lack of bank financing?
We just found the right bank at the end
I
of the
see.
day. It worked
Okay.
out where somebody eventually said, yes, we'll do this. You know?
Okay, good.
Yeah. So,
And so your investors, tell me what that process has been like for you. For some people, it's surprising 20 years later, you know, many of them are still in and only a couple exited and have continued to grow with the business. What's been your experience with that? Or sometimes the operators end up, you know, intentionally trying to buy back part of those initial investors.
and I think over time that's the plan. I mean, it's a family and friends business, and I'm
Right.
just very lucky to have kind of that level of support.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
Everybody is a known entity who were willing to invest in you know, myself and Lee, and so I mean,
Yeah,
eventually when we're, you know, rocking and rolling, I would love to be able to buy all those folks out.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the first place you go, right? When you're starting a business, it's friends and family, and then, you know, maybe some other options, and before you get to a Series A, and then get more serious about it. But if you can do it with friends and family, that's
You're a lucky person.
yeah, that's good fortune for sure. So I was intrigued with the actual design. We kind of touched on that a bit on the inside.
Yeah.
So if you have, you know, this building shell and your other ancillary spaces, you know, locker rooms and offices and stuff, but the actual rock wall, you know, where they go in there, what the shape looks like, you know, the different angles and slopes, and not the routes, but the actual structure. And when you look behind, you know, the Grand Island structure itself, and you look inside there, I mean, there's a lot going on there from a structural. It's all very cool, but there's a company, a manufacturer that you can reach out to that helps you with that part initially.
Correct. So there are nationally and internationally several climbing wall building companies out there. We used a company called Rockworks. They've been doing it for a long time. You know, they constructed walls in several of the gyms I've climbed in my lifetime, and they were, you know, they're a design build company. So they put the walls on paper for us, full virtual walkthrough. The very early virtual walkthrough of the gym that you saw on our website, that was done by them.
Yeah, cool.
Because they had the whole thing essentially pre-designed.
Oh, so they can send you
three
like
dimensions.
a virtual walkthrough before you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Exactly. And so the intent when you're designing that space is to try and replicate as many of the things as you might encounter in the outdoors, right? So different grades of slope, from, we call it slabby, which is sloping away from you, to overhung, which is sloping towards you, to cave, you know, which is nearly upside down, which you find on our bouldering wall upstairs, and just all sorts of different angles and forms to challenge the movement, because a huge part of climbing is movement. It's far from being just about brute strength. And so Rockworks came up with designs and suggestions. We went through a lot of iterations. Lee, I mentioned, is, you know, a much more experienced climber than I am, and so he did a lot of work and, like, you know, push here, pull here kind of stuff, and just trying to get the walls to where we wanted them to be, as well as the layout within the facility. And you and I had mentioned this yesterday. So you can build, your natural thought is, I want to build along the inside of the walls, but then you create inside angles, and those become effectively lost space, because then you have one person climbing on a whole lot of square footage.
Right. You couldn't have two people right in the corner, but you've got them on the inside of your building where you have the highest roof line, right?
Exactly. So now they're in the middle of the building. They take advantage of peak height, 35 feet, and they're both 360 degrees around. And yeah, you said the words Grand Isle. We call the big one the Grand Island, and we have the one in the front. We call that our Oak Tree Tower, you know, just trying to tie to our Louisiana roots, because we all grew up climbing what, as kids? Trees, you know, not rocks.
Very cool. So let's talk about when you started. How was the first few weeks and months and year? Did you get much traction? Was it a slow build?
Yes and no. So, strangely enough, Baton Rouge has a very small core climbing community. Breck Park on Kenilworth, the adventure park, has had a climbing tower there for, I don't know when it opened, to be honest. And there has been a group of climbers who have been going there for forever. And they have been commuting to Lafayette, that has a climbing gym I mentioned earlier. And so we knew when we started that we would probably get all of these folks. And then, of course, in our demographic studies, trying to find out, what part of our demographic would try something like this, adventurous, that all went into our pro formas, trying to figure out our growth. And so we had a pre-sale before we started. It's the only time we've offered annual memberships, and we got 22 annual members right out of the gate, some of whom have never climbed before, which was pretty cool. And we've just had a pandemic aside, a very natural, smooth growth over the course of the years.
Good deal. Well, I want to pick up on that pandemic on the other side of this break. So let's get a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. We would like to thank Gear Train for their support of the NXT Entrepreneur Podcast. Gear Train is a national program management company that specializes in the inspection and audit of conveyor systems, VRCs, robotics, and material handling equipment. Gear Train also manages routine maintenance and repair programs, as well as emergency callouts for clients all across the United States. Gear Train technicians have the experience to keep your automated equipment systems running at peak output. For all of your inspection, audit, and maintenance needs, reach out to Gear Train. They can be found online at geartrainperforms.com. And we are back with Robb Antrobus with Uptown Climbing. So, touching on the pandemic, it was devastating to so many businesses, gyms, and any public gathering places, and very good for other businesses. But you're in that gym category, right? So, tell us what impact COVID had on Uptown Climbing, and what you did, and how you survived, and how are you still here today?
Yeah, so like most everybody else, it was very difficult. I took a very interesting time to take a vacation. So the pandemic has been, we kind of hear about it in January. It's ramping up in
January of 2020,
right?
Right.
And so in March, I go on a golf trip, one of my first vacations in a very long time. And so I'm outside of Las Vegas on a golf trip, and we are already having the conversations, with myself and the management team, and as well as in Facebook groups with gyms nationally, because of the conversations about how this thing is spreading in closed spaces and all that kind of stuff are already happening. And we're thinking about, well, what do we do as responsible business owners, as part of the Baton Rouge community, and as our members as a community? What do we do? And so we decided on, I forget the exact dates, but March 15th or 16th to close the gym. And then within 24 hours, the governor came out and closed all gyms in the state. And so that trend, of course, accelerated nationwide.
And
so
closed for?
We were closed for 2 months in total.
So how did your customers take that?
We are incredibly lucky, I think. So about 30% of our members paid dues straight on through, even though we were closed. And a significant portion did not immediately come back when we reopened 2 months later in mid-May, and continued to pay their dues. So
that's phenomenal.
I had a conversation with one member who I'd reached out to personally and said, "You guys are still paying your dues. Do you know this? Are you aware of it? We'll freeze it. Whatever." And he says, "My job was not impacted." He said, "As long as I'm getting paid, you're getting paid."
That's sweet.
And he's had a family membership, and now they're back in and climbing. And so,
well, look, it's people like that I think truly understood that if you want, the businesses that you like to have, climbing or restaurants or whatever, you have to support them. You have to find a way to support them, or they won't be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so
kudos to them.
We indeed. I mean, we are so lucky to have the people we have. It's a wonderful group of folks. So so we reopened in May. We're on limited capacity. I think occupancy was 25%. I think when we first reopened, that was the provision. And so we closed to the public. We were closed to the public a lot longer than we were closed to our members. We went to a reservation-only system to manage that occupancy and to a members-only facility. And so a lot of our members came back in and were climbing in masks. Some came in and climbed in masks and said, no, this is tough. I'm going to freeze my membership and I'll see you later.
Yep.
So
I'll come back when I can climb without a mask.
When I'm ready, yeah. And so
but look,
because we furloughed 28 roughly part-time employees. Continued to pay all the managers, our salaried folks. Eventually got PPP draw number 2 as well. And I think, but for those, it would have been tenuous at best. And we also got the economic injury disaster loan as a backstop, because at the time we had no idea how long this thing would last.
Yeah, so, you read these things about a routine, right? And it takes 14 days or 30 days or whatever to lock someone in a routine. But the opposite must be true if you break a routine and now they can't climb for 60 days or longer. So how difficult was it to get people back into the gym?
So we're still working on it, right? So if you look at what happened, our day use, the folks who just walking off the street without a membership, it went to 0, and it was 0 for a lot longer than those 2 months, right? Until our capacity, our occupancy was increased to where we could start letting the public back in. The public also takes a lot more care, right? The membership, you check them in at the front desk and they're gone in. But a new person off the street has to take a full orientation, right? And so that's a lot of staff time. That's a lot of face-to-face time. We're trying to manage all of these different, things we're thinking about. And so walk-ins are still taking a long time to get back in for whatever reasons. At the same time, we allow our members to freeze their membership for just a few dollars a month. Our freezes doubled, and they're still running a lot higher than they were pre-pandemic. So we're still trying to solve how do we get these frozen members back in the gym, even though our membership numbers have fully recovered. A lot greater portion of that membership is frozen.
Yeah, I like the environment that you have there. You got a couple of dogs that appear to be resident ambassadors.
Yeah. So my dog Cooper, he's a 9.5-year-old Labrador. Yeah. He's got a new little sister, 10.5-month-old Cayenne, and he's the ambassador of the gym. People walk in the door and they pet Cooper on the head, or people say hello and goodbye to Cooper, and they could care less about me at the end of the day. It's like, where's Cooper?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be a good fit for the clientele and the people that enjoy the outdoors, and although they're climbing inside there, it feels right, let's say.
And it's very similar to outdoors, just like you said, right? You got a crag dog, you got a bunch of people trying to solve a problem. How do I get up this route? And you got everybody around them cheering them on, and offering tips and stuff like that. You talked about it early when the ladies were speed climbing, and you had somebody just like cheering them on. And we'll have kids climb halfway up the wall and they'll lock up, they'll get scared, and whoever's around will encourage it. Or somebody's just struggling to get those last few feet, and someone on the mezzanine will be like, come on, you got this.
Yeah.
So
we touched earlier on that sense of community.
Yeah.
And I know there's more to that. Tell me what your experience is with that in your business.
Well, how many, I don't know the answer to this question, and I should before I ask it, but How many businesses do you know where your staff spend more hours in the business off the clock than they do on the clock? Yeah. So my staff, they live there. They come and they work, and they come and they climb. People don't just come and climb for fun and fitness. They come and meet their friends, and they're there for 4 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. And they're working on these problems over the course of days and weeks and months. You can come in and try and solve something, but it may take you a full-on month. And so it's just you and your buddy.
And the problems being, how do I get up that route?
How do I get to the top? And maybe it's strength, maybe it's, body position and movement,
So on the community thing, I noticed a couple of guys in there on the mezzanine, second floor, working on their laptops, almost like they're at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
Kind of. And that's their comfortable place, it looked like to me.
Yeah.
So you could really sense that. But I was also intrigued with what you just mentioned about problem solving. And when we were talking about this yesterday, you had mentioned something about, some other type of exercise. What, you can pick, a number of different things that you may do for exercise. But in the rock wall climbing, you're really hyper-focused as you're reaching, how do you get to that next rock hold? And, how do you get to the next, more difficult climb and things like that. So
I always say the thing that I love most about climbing is it's this combination of strength and fitness and problem solving. If you're not trying to think your way through the route, you're never solely going to power your way through a route. And so, and that focus that you have on the wall, where you can't, if you come in stressed when you're on a route, you can't think about anything except for that route. And so it's the problem solving combined with the physical challenge that has drawn me to rock climbing and will for the rest of my life.
I like that, because I can imagine, that rush that you get from aerobic exercise with endorphins, and how good that makes you feel. And you combine that with this intellectual problem solving thing. I can see where that would and then be the best of both worlds.
The successes along the way, as you get to be better, you're like, oh my God, I just climbed my first 510C or whatever. And we have what we call it the bragging board. I stole that from somebody. But it's, hey, I did something cool. Let's share it with the community. Take a picture of them and celebrate it.
Yeah, I read something here, Rob. It was a quote from you that said you like to push people to do more than they thought they could. And I was curious, what does that do for you?
It's a good question. It's just really fun to try and help someone get past whatever that block is in their head. And it's rarely physical. It's usually mental in a climbing gym. I'm just drawn to, it's hard for me to stay in the office because if I hear screaming, I'm coming out and I'm helping someone to get up the wall. If I hear a parent trying to talk their kid up the wall outside the door on the tree, I'm coming out of the office and I'm like, okay, here, put your foot here, try this, all these kinds of things. There's just joy in helping people succeed. As simple as that.
Well, I witnessed it because I think when the three of us walked into your shop yesterday, I don't know that anyone was planning on climbing, but and I certainly would have been climbing if I had I was a little further along with my recovery. But I'll be in there soon enough. Let's start to wrap up. I wanted to pick your brain on what's your vision for Uptown. Have you and Lee talked about growth plans? Is there any thoughts about other locations, other markets? Or you just, you've got to get through this current situation, but beyond that, assuming that all gets back to normal for you, is that?
So, we're 2 years behind plan, I think. And like you said, we kind of got to get our feet under us with the post-pandemic work. But so when we originally thought about Uptown and Baton Rouge, we tried to size the gym for Baton Rouge.
Right.
So I think from a Baton Rouge standpoint, we're pretty close to where we need to be. So then the question becomes, well, what other areas can we go to? I think New Orleans is the next natural extension for us. I think that's some time out. And right now they have a bouldering gym there, and I don't know what their plans are. So that's all stuff that we have to consider. I think a lot of the initial focus is going to be on ourselves. You know, it would be great to acquire the land underneath us. Right?
Yeah.
And then you don't know what you don't know, but I think upon analysis, living inside that space for 4 years, there are some things we'd like to change in the space. You know, better reception area, perhaps more retail, so there may be opportunity just to bust out a couple of walls and try and improve our current situation. But we have, in terms of membership growth and what we can handle in that gym, plenty of room for Baton Rouge growth. If you go to some gyms around the country, you'll have people waiting in line for a rope to climb on, and we're not remotely close to that.
And
yet.
I've been in other gyms where it may be a big gym, maybe 60 or 70,000 foot gym, and they'll have a rock wall, but they just won't have it open. There'll be no staffing for that, and you know, it may be just they do it at a certain time. You know, at 5 o'clock, they may have an hour where you can climb. But I've seen that in a number of gyms that I've been into across the country, even in places like Breckenridge just a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
you know, which I found interesting. Okay, last question. What advice would you give to a young entrepreneur starting out, just from what you've been through, what you've learned in your career and your experience?
You know, I probably should have prepared for that question.
Yeah.
Goodness, I preparation. I think if you don't have what you want to accomplish on paper that you can reference, getting your thoughts on paper helps to congeal them and kind of make them real. And so writing that business plan is so critical. You find where the gaps are in your thinking, because when you have to take what you're thinking and put it on paper and make it real and have it as a presentable document to get things like financing, you can't miss anything. And so you spend so much time reading, rereading, finding the gaps, and figuring out, you know, what you've missed. So that, I think, is critical. And then I think the second thing is, you know, we've talked about loving what you do, but if it's a service business, you really got to enjoy helping people.
Yeah, good point.
And we're just kind of coming off of that. And I think part of you know, my staff are the same way. It's like, you know, they're out there helping people. If we're quiet and there's some newbies in the gym, my staff will come off the front desk and go and offer to put somebody on a rope, you know, versus an auto belay, just to try and give them some small successes in the gym. So you got to take care of your people. You got to plan, you know, for everything, and of course take care of your staff as well.
You know what I love is, even with an MBA that you had earned and, you know, 12, 14 years in corporate America, on the inside of, you know, deep into business audit,
Yeah.
you still had the foresight or wherewithal to reach out to SCORE to get someone to help you with the business plan. I think that says a lot, you know. So, look, I appreciate it. I enjoyed this conversation so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Really like your business, and I can't wait to get in there. So I can tell you that I've talked to several people in the last few days, just letting them know that I was having you on the show, and almost all of them said, "Oh yeah, I've been in there." I mean, like, I was surprised. So you've got a good reputation.
I love it.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you.
Thank you. We'll get you over the wall soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I am so happy to be back in the studio. I really, really enjoyed that conversation with Robb. And so glad that I got to go check out his business. You can feel the culture that he's developed there. The customers genuinely love to be there, and it's palpable. And I love the reputation that he's built. So many people that I've talked to say great things about his business. I love, as I mentioned in the podcast, that Robb was able to start a business doing something that he loved to do. And that doesn't happen as often as we might think. I thought it was great when he explained that he went out for help in creating his business plan, even with his master's degree and his 12 to 14 years of experience in corporate America. He did internal audits and assessed risk in all sorts of businesses that he mentioned. And he was able to use that to assess the risk in the rock wall climbing business, which there certainly is. And he was able to quantify that, and which led him to get into business. So that was really cool. But I love the final thing that he said, that if you're going to be in a service business, you need to love people. You need to want to help. And I witnessed that firsthand. So we appreciate Robb sharing his story with us. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you next time. We would like to thank our title sponsor, B1 Bank. They can be found online at b1bank.com. The Next Entrepreneur is produced by Propel Productions. You can find more information at propelyourstory.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the Next Entrepreneur Podcast and hit the bell for notifications. You can also follow us on social media. The links are in the description below.